President Macron, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak with you.
We are honored to have you here to speak with us. Mr. President, take me inside your meeting at the White House today, those high-stakes talks. Are you now closer to reaching a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine?
What do you mean he's not doing anything, The one who's doing the most is Trump and his team.
Look, I do hope, and I really believe it was an important meeting at the White House this 18th of August with President Zelensky, President Trump, and a series of European leaders here. All of us, we want peace. All of us. From day one. And this is very important. Second, all of us are very clear that we want to stop the killings as soon as possible. You can call it a ceasefire, you can call it a truce, an armistice, but we want to stop these killings. Number three, all of us, we are clear about the fact that we want a robust and long-standing peace.
Of course.
Which means no peace without what we call security guarantees. Why? Because we want to preserve Ukraine from risk of new aggression after this peace.
But we all know that United States is the country that is going to provide those guarantees, It's the country that is going to do the most. To be honest, they're not going to do that much,
And we want to contain Russia as an aggressive power vis-à-vis the rest of Europe. Here are our objectives, and I think we did progress because we converge, all of us, first to work very actively on security guarantees. So from tomorrow, we will work very actively. And, we launched in February this year this coalition of the willing. We have now 30 countries, and we co-share with the UK this coalition, and this coalition will work very actively now with the United States of America.
But even they are like 30 countries, USA is the country that is doing the most, even that they are like 30.
It's a great news. In order to provide, the day we have a peace agreement, these security guarantees together. And second, we decided as well that a bilateral meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin will be organized, and this is the clear outcome of the discussion at the end of our meeting between President Trump and President Putin. And this bilateral meeting will be followed by a trilateral meeting between President Zelensky, President Trump, President Putin.
I think that they should have the three of them at the beginning, You cannot have some meeting between Zelensky and Putin, only them, You need Trump to be there, like a midman. That's... Otherwise, it's not going to work.
And I proposed as well, as a follow-up, that we enlarge and have a multilateral meeting, because the Europeans, probably the Turks as well, and some others have to be around the table, because we don't just speak about the security of Ukraine, but the security of the whole Europe. So on all these points, we had a clear convergence. And for me, it was very important today, after the meeting between President Trump and President Putin in Alaska, to have this clear convergence of Europe and Ukraine and the US on these key outcomes.
I want to delve into all of those issues. I do have to ask you, President Trump was overheard on a microphone talking to you, and he said, quote, "I think he wants to make a deal," meaning Putin. "I think he wants to make a deal for me." You understand that? As crazy as it sounds.
It doesn't sound that crazy, man. I mean, they're looking to little details just to make like a polemic, I mean, it's just words, man. I mean, he's doing a deal for me. He meant, United States, USA, but they're doing this because, if Trump and his team accomplish to have a peace deal here, he's going to get the Nobel Prize. Can you imagine all of this? The NBC News and the Fox News and the CNN and all of them. Could you imagine if Trump gets a Nobel Prize? What they're going to do? they're going to crumble, man. They're going to crumble. That's the reason why they looking at little things like he said that on the microphone and etc. I mean, they're nonsense, man. They're just little details, just optics, man.
What went through your head when he said that to you?
I think if, at the end of the day, if we have a deal which is compliant with this long-standing and robust peace, this is a great news.
Yeah.
And your president indeed is very confident about the capacity he has to get this deal done, which is a good news for all of us and can break this, I would say, this
cycle,
daily killings.
Oh my God! Oh yes,
which are the responsibility of the Russian aggressor. So I think it's a great news. My point, and this is why we've worked so hard during the past few months, and we need this convergence, is to be sure that this deal is not detrimental to Ukraine and Europe.
I mean, Europe, it doesn't matter. Honestly, do you think that Putin or Trump, they care about France and all and Europe? They don't care about them because Trump knows that he's providing all the leverage that they need. They don't need Europe to being on this, but they do it just for optics, man.
And all of us, we want a deal and we want a peace deal.
If they don't care if they do, if Europe comes have some benefit. They don't care about it, you know. They already have enough benefit from the United States, so they don't care. They just want to please Putin and want to please Trump, but not all. They don't going to please Zelensky, man. I'm sorry for Ukraine, you know. Sorry for the people, but that's the way it is. They don't care about that. They only care to. They're going to flip this. They're going to give some land from Ukraine to Russia. They're going to do it so they can please Putin and they can end this thing. And Trump is willing to do it because he wants the Nobel Prize. You know?
But we want to make sure that this peace, and so this deal, will be something which will allow the Ukrainians to recover the country and live in peace, to be sure the day after this peace deal that they will have sufficient deterrence power not to be attacked again, and to be sure for the Europeans that they will live in peace and security. So this is the nature of the peace, which will be now the core of our work. But I think this is a great news, and indeed your president is very confident about his capacity to get this deal done with President Putin, and it's great.
He's glazing Trump, man. He's glazing Trump, and they don't want that. You know, those reporters, they don't want that. You know, I always said that there's no villains, there's no heroes, but I think that the media is kind of the villain here. You know, they want war. You know, they bet you that they prefer war than Trump having a Nobel Prize. Of course, man, of course. But the gamble here is that if they please Russia, if they please Putin, maybe he's going to think, oh, you know, this work kind of okay. Not that much, but maybe they say like, we're going to invade again another country just to have those benefits, you know. But it's a gamble, it's a risk, and Trump is willing to take it, you know. And they don't care about Zelensky. They don't care about Ukraine. I'm sorry. Sorry to say that, but they don't care, you know.
Let's talk about the issues. You were very firm. You still think a ceasefire is necessary. President Trump, on his way to Alaska, said that he wanted there to be a ceasefire agreement. Otherwise, he said there would be very severe consequences. Do you think a ceasefire is still possible?
Of course.
I do hope. Let's call it once again truce or ceasefire, but we have to stop the killings. First, for humanitarian reasons.
Yeah.
Second, because if we want sincere, reasonable, comprehensive talks in order to build a peace, you cannot organize this discussion, I mean, in the middle of the bombs. Look, today we were with President Zelensky. President Trump called President Putin at the end of our meeting, and we meet again right after this call. In the meantime, the Russian army organized a series of strikes on civilians in Ukraine. So it's impossible for an Ukrainian president and Ukrainian officials to have talks about peace as their country is being destroyed and as their civilians are being killed.
But, that's war. I mean, they try to put Putin also as a villain. He's not a villain, man. I mean, I heard that they're trying to put several military bases through NATO around Russia, and that's the reason why they invade Ukraine, because they want to put a military base there. They're getting surrounded, man, and I think that every country on their situation, they will do the same. They will avoid to having some kind of military surrounded by military bases, but he's not a hero also, he's not fighting for his people, he's just only acting on interesting, and that's the way it is. And the cake, it's already being split, and the winners here, first of all, is going to be Putin, then is going to be Trump, and that's it. Sorry for the people of Ukraine, but that's the way it is. It's not the way that I would like, of course not, but it is what it is.
All of the European leaders press President Trump on that point today and insist that he continue to apply pressure to Putin for a ceasefire right now.
He's not putting pressure on Putin, man. He's not doing that. He's his friend, man, and he's like sharing the news and sharing the information with him. Trump called Putin after the meeting. Why is that? Because they're friends, man, and they're or maybe how can I put it? They're allies, man. You're not going to see a war between USA and Russia, because that means the end of the world.
I will be very clear on that. President Trump was the first one to propose a ceasefire in February. In March, President Zelensky accepted the unconditional ceasefire in Doha. The one who always refused the ceasefire has been President Putin.
So should President Trump impose sanctions on President Putin now?
And President Trump was very clear on the fact that after Alaska, his perspective is not just to have a ceasefire, but a peace deal, which is much more comprehensive. So it could be a good news, but it's clear that a peace deal will not be written overnight. It will take time, probably a few days, few weeks. And during this period of time, we need a truce. This is why I call it a truce and not a ceasefire, if we want to use a different word. But we have to stop the killings. So
we all
agree with your president that we have to increase the pressure to stop the killings and to launch a process to have a full-fledged peace agreement. So this is our objectives.
Can he do that? Can you apply pressure to Putin without imposing
I'm very much
sanctions?
in favor of the fact that if at the end of the day there is no serious progress during the bilateral, or if there is a refusal of the trilateral meeting, and or if the Russians don't comply with this approach, yes, we have to increase the sanctions.
We have. He's not doing anything on that. It's just optics. The ones that is doing everything is Trump. So, and right now he's not putting pressure on Putin. He's pleasing Putin. That's the way it is.
Secondary and primary sanctions in order to increase the pressure on the Russians to do so. And sometimes I'm very shocked by, I have to say, the fact that a lot of people can present something as just a war between two sides. There is an aggressor, which is Russia. There is a country which decided to kill people, to steal children, and who refused this ceasefire and peace. So we cannot just create an equivalent situation between Ukraine and Russia.
It's trying to put Putin as a villain, but he's not. They're doing awful things between two sides. You cannot say like Russia, it's the aggressor. They push Russia to do this, So I'm not in favor to Russia. I'm not in favor to Ukraine. I'm just telling you the things the way they are. Macron is too soft. You have seen what's going on in France and Paris with the immigrants? I mean, he's too soft, man. He's not going to do anything.
Let me ask you about the discussion over security guarantees.
Yes.
What exactly did you agree to as it relates to security guarantees? Does that mean European troops? And does that mean U.S. troops?
Look, I think it's for me, it's a very important progress of the past few days that your president expressed a clear commitment of the U.S. to be part of the security guarantees. It's brand new. And last February, when I took the responsibility to gather a series of European leaders with President Zelensky in Paris, and we followed up in London, and we created this coalition of the will. And it was a reaction to the feeling we had that we could see a temptation to go to a rapid peace, but without any guarantee for Ukraine. And we know what it means. It was Georgia 2008, but it was as well Crimea 2014. And there is full certainty that if you make any peace deal without security guarantee, Russia will never respect its words.
That's true, because it's a trend of Russia to invade certain places. And right now, Putin, he cannot fail. You know, his people, the Russians, he's going to look pretty bad if they don't give him something because he's been like 3 years of war already, and he's not going to come back Russia and say, you know what, your husbands, friends, sons are dead, and we didn't get anything. That is not going to happen. He prefers to go deeply on the war, full on war, than go back to his country as a loser.
It will never comply with its own commitments. So it's for us totally critical. And this is an essential part of any deal for Ukraine and for the Europeans. This is for our own security. So this is a very important progress of the past few days that the US now is willing to be part of this security guarantees. We worked with the Coalition of the Willing, which is co-chaired by UK and France. And we have a very clear view of the content of such a security guarantee. The first pillar is the Ukrainian army. The first security guarantee for Ukraine and Europe is to have an important Ukrainian army, which will resist to any new aggression and which will create a deterrence effect vis-à-vis, the attempt to aggress Ukraine again. So we worked on the format of this army, and in fact, what we want is no limitation in terms of number of soldiers, ammunition, equipment, and so on.
But who's going to pay for the most of that thing? The USA, man. I mean, who was the country that was like giving a lot of money to NATO, etc., so they can exist? USA. So, I mean, USA is going to do most of the expenses there, you know, and they don't have any accountability on that situation. But well,
and who is ready to help the Ukrainians on what?
But USA also have interest on Ukraine, so that's the reason why.
Training, equipments, Patriot system, SAMT, new generation system, aircraft, and so on, to have this solid Ukrainian army. The second pillar is to be sure that in the air, on sea, on land, we have a support from all the different key partners of the coalition of the willing to come and to support the Ukrainian forces. Not to be a substitute, and the obsession and the first priority is not to have our boots on the ground, but to be sure that we have regular operations which are a sort of guarantee or strategic signal that it's not just a piece of paper, that the day they are attacked, we will be here. Because this piece of paper, we had it in the past. It was called the Budapest Agreement.
Yeah, that's true. Russia didn't follow those agreements, so it's true on that. It's going to be the peace guarantees that they're going to have in Ukraine has to be on paper and also on guns. on military equipment, etc.
And it didn't work. So we want to create a clear strategic signal of our support to the Ukrainian army. And some of the key people of the key countries, part of the coalition of the willing, already committed to do it. UK, France, Turkey, for instance, which has a very important role in the sea, and a series of other countries. So now, from tomorrow, we will start to work with the US, all the members of the coalition of the willing, these 30 countries, from Canada to Japan, Australia, and a lot of Europeans, in order to clearly go to the detail and say who is ready to do what. And this first phase is very important and should be finalized before the trilateral meeting, because these security guarantees are the one to put Ukraine in a situation to negotiate.
And I'm getting a wrap. Let me just ask you two very lightning round questions. As you have said, Russia is the aggressor here. And yet President Trump has talked about the possibility of land swaps. There are reports that President Putin wants to keep all of the territory that he's illegally occupied, and even more, the entire Donbass region. Is that a non-starter, and yet is the only solution for Ukraine to give some of the territory?
Look,
Ukraine is going to give territory to Russia, man. They're going to do that. There's no other option. They're just deciding how much Ukraine is going to give to Russia. But they're going to give for sure.
To Russia.
Doesn't like that.
I don't see any swap in the proposal of the Russians, except a swap in comparison with what they wanted at the beginning. But let me be clear on territory. They got a lot of territories after the first phase of the war between February and summer 2022. But because the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people did organize themselves very impressively, because we organized unprecedented support, they managed to push them back at the end of the second semester of 2022.
But why he's saying like we? You know, no, man. I'm saying once again, USA put most of all of the money, man, thanks to Biden.
And if you take the situation between November 2022 and now, more than 1,000 days of war, the Russian army took less than 1% of the Ukrainian territory.
That's true. Russia is looking pretty bad. Pretty bad. Because Ukraine, it's too little compared to Russia, but we must not forget that at a certain point, USA was putting a lot of money on Russia. Because, you know, Russia, it's a pretty rich country, man. They have a lot of minerals, a lot of weird earth and stuff like that. So there's interest on that.
So I want everybody listening to us and watching your program to be aware of the fact that the Russians, they are not performing well there. 3.5 years ago, they launched a special operations which was supposed to last 3 weeks. And during the past 1,000 days, they took less than 1% of the Ukrainian territory. So all those who are saying, the Ukrainians are lost, they will lose, it's a total fake news. Now, when we speak about territory, this is to the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian people to discuss about it. It's not my job. And it's absolutely unacceptable to have all the leaders discussing about that. And your president was very clear before Alaska as well. Why? Because it's about sovereignty. And third, the day we start accepting the recognition of territories being taken by force, this is just the end of international order. How do you want us collectively to be credible in other places in Europe, in Africa? How do you want us to keep having debate on Taiwan? Do you believe one second if we recognize part of Donbass or Crimea or I don't know what, and you say, okay, because this is, I don't know what, nuclear power, it's okay. There is no more international order. This is not compliant with the UN Charter. And the day after, our collective credibility, the US, the Europeans, all these permanent members of the Security Council will be totally zero vis-à-vis all the others who think we are the garant in last resort of this international order.
I'm getting a wrap, but
Despite of all that, they're going to give land to Russia. Russia is not going to go back to his country like a total loser, man. That's the reason why Trump said, like, Putin has a deal for me. And Macron already knows that, but they're doing optics, But they're going to do that.
very last question in a few seconds. We are going to see this meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. What is your level of optimism as we sit here today that they can break through this logjam?
Look, I think the optimism of your president is to be taken seriously. So if he considers he can get a deal done, this is a great news, and we have to do whatever we can to have a great deal being fixed, concluded. But a great deal is a deal with security guarantees and a robust peace. As far as I'm concerned, when I look at the situation and the facts, I don't see President Putin really willing to get peace now. But perhaps I'm too pessimistic. But so I think it's very important to launch this process. I think it's very important we build the security guarantees. This is a game changer for Ukraine and for the European security.
You cannot have a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, only two of them. Trump has to be there,
And I think we have to launch the process of this bilateral meeting, this trilateral meeting, and this multilateral meeting. But I think at a point of time, probably, we will have to increase the pressure on Russia to be sure they want peace. Because as long as President Putin and his people will consider they can win this war and get a better result by force, they will not negotiate. This is my feeling and my conviction. So it's important to remain united. This is a key message of the meeting today, to be lucid about the situation, to be committed, and we are. And I will do my best, and France will do its best to have a positive bilateral and trilateral meeting and to deliver the results following these lines. But we are ready as well to step up sanctions and tariffs in order to increase the pressure. And I think it will be very important, in case of failure of such a process, that your president as well takes the baton and increase the pressure.
They're not going to do anything. They cannot do anything, man. I mean, they say that they're going to put some pressure on Russia. They're going to do anything about it. No. I hope that everything turns okay, man, because if otherwise, I don't know what will happen. I mean, they're going to go full on war, and maybe it's going to be the World War III. Hope not. I hope not, but we'll see. Well, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for seeing me today. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.